Senator Bill Hagerty of the great state of Tennessee joins me because he and Maisie have a mutual interest in the Pacific Island nations that we've long ignored, and they matter because of China. Good morning, Senator. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hugh, it's always great to be on with you. Good morning to you.
Can you explain a little bit to me what you and Senator Hirono are up to?
Well, I think we see the region and the whole Indo-Pacific as extremely strategic and vital to America. We see China's very aggressive posture. Just look what they've recently done in the Solomon Islands, signing a security agreement with the Solomon Islands. They are trying to use their typical means of corruption, the debt trap diplomacy that they deploy, et cetera, to get more of these smaller nations to fall their way, whether it's to put pressure on Taiwan, whether it's to get more votes in these multilateral organizations like the United Nations. I think the United States needs to be more present, and we need to have more connectivity in that region. We certainly have, a major presence in Japan. You're well aware of. You and I have talked about it many times before, but the largest component of U.S. military stationed anywhere is based in Japan, where I served as U.S. ambassador most recently. And we have, incredible strategic interest in the region. It's a vital area for growth. The busiest sea lanes in the world, East China Sea, South China Sea. Our interests are very much aligned with keeping a free and open region there in the Pacific.
I also think keeping China investment out. I'm going to come back to the Solomon Islands, but what do you and the senator specifically propose in terms of spending and bases and things like that?
We're looking at extending our presence and studying where we can make the most the most impact there. Making certain that we have free market financing available for infrastructure is something I worked on again when I served as U.S. ambassador. We put together a consortium with the United States, Japan, and Australia to provide an alternative to China's Belt and Road financing in the region. What we're mainly trying to do is use private sector funds and basically lead the way and demonstrate the fact that America is present. If you add up all of the private investment that has been made in the region, America is still by far the largest investor, but we need to keep that going because China is making what I would say are strategic investments in the region, Hugh, meaning they may not have a profit motive, but they certainly have a motive that is consistent with China's strategy to dominate the region. We need to be there. We need to be present. We need to put it back.
Now, Senator, I don't think the Steelers fans out there who listen in great numbers have any idea where the Solomon Islands are, because I don't have any idea where they are other than they're in the Pacific and they're a long way away. What are we doing about that Chinese play there? Because I know that they mattered a lot in World War II, and I think that's the last time I've read about them is that the fleet at full tide. What are we trying to do to upend that approach by China to the Solomon Islands?
Well, our concern is that China takes its agreement that they struck with the Solomon Islands for, quote, defense, and turns that into a basing proposition where they actually put a military presence in place. So we're in the process of putting a diplomatic presence there so that we are physically, we physically have diplomats in the area that we can push back. We can work with the Solomon Islands government, let them know, yes, America and her allies care about the region as well. We're going to be looking for opportunities to work together with the people there so that China isn't their only alternative.
Let's turn to the mainland. Financial Times reports this morning that international investors are selling Chinese debt at a record pace. They also report in the Telegraph that the Chinese housing market has, for the first time in decades, gone backwards. That they're not able to interest the average Chinese consumer in a small lot purchase in one of the minor cities, which is the canary in the coal mine there. Are we dealing with a potentially catastrophic economic situation in China, Bill Hagerty, because that won't stay in China?
China has got some major problems. I think part of it goes to the demographic situation there. They've got just this massive demographic hole because of their one-child policy. And they've got an aging population, a birth rate that's below replacement rate right now. And they're going to have a very difficult time maintaining support for the elderly population as it moves forward. You begin to see that manifest itself in the housing markets. But I think there are other reasons for this too. China has certainly gone to this zero COVID policy because they have not vaccinated the more vulnerable people in their own population. That's caused massive shutdowns, massive economic dislocation. That's very hard to recover from. And their way to recover from it in China is to make more infrastructure investment. Well, many of the Chinese infrastructure investments might be good ego projects for Chinese leadership, but they don't have real economic value. So I think it's a misallocation of resources within the country. It's demographic problems. It's their reaction to the COVID pandemic, which, had things been different in Wuhan and they not spread it, we might be in a very different place right now. So China's dealing with it on all fronts.
Their top anti-corruption agency, according to the Wall Street Journal this morning, also announced they are investigating a senior Chinese central banker, Mr. Sun, for suspected leaking of official economic statistics. It's a corrupt state. I think you know that. I know that. Everyone who listens to us knows that. But Xi Jinping has managed to manage the corruption. Is he losing his grip?
Well, he's used the corruption police there, if you will, Hugh, to knock out his opposition, right, left, and center. That's what it means. If they're investigating someone for, quote, corruption, it means that there is somebody that's not on board with Xi Jinping, and that typically is the case, at least. And I would not be surprised at all if this data weren't embarrassing to the Chinese government, so this is their means of punishing them.
Now, in terms of Japan, I just finished watching Tokyo Vice, which was sent 20 years ago, and it's a fascinating bit of production. It really takes me inside of what it's like to live in Japan. It reminds me of my only time there visiting family when they were stationed abroad in China, in Japan. What is going on in that government? Have they settled down into the next era of leadership? Have they become more robust in their defense spending, Senator?
Well, I regret to say I've not had time yet to see Tokyo Vice. I hear great things about it. One of my good friends, Bob Whiting, wrote a book called Tokyo Underworld many years ago, and it provided tremendous insight in terms of how things worked in Japan, probably 20 years even before the time that Tokyo Vice was set. But if you think about what's happening right now in the government, we're seeing a transition from the longest-serving prime minister in Japanese history, that was Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, to the new government. Now we went through Prime Minister Suga, now we're in Prime Minister Kishida's government. And what we've seen is, I think, a real break with some of the former positions that Japan had taken. The first one I'll start with is Russia. Prime Minister Abe spent years trying to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. His hope was to regain negotiating posture relative to what Japan calls the Northern Territories. These are islands that have been in dispute since the end of World War II. Russia has claimed them, Japan claims them, but Russia has taken more of a presence on those islands, forcing Japan to negotiate. Putin always let Prime Minister Abe have a little bit of rope, but never would come to the table really in any serious fashion to negotiate about the islands. But Abe was always cautious not to take a position that would be counter to Russia's interest, so he could leave that option open. Prime Minister Kishida now has basically said, I know the Russians aren't going to be there at the table, and the right thing to do is to side with the rest of the world in terms of sanctioning Russia over Ukraine. So we saw Japan step up and do that. We saw Japan step up and say, we're going to significantly increase our defense budget. This is something that America's wanted to see. They're going to go from 1% of GDP to 2% of GDP. When I was in Japan just a few weeks ago, leading the first bipartisan congressional delegation there since the pandemic began, I emphasized this need not be just a procurement exercise. Use those funds to get more interoperable, get more coordinated with America, more training exercises. Let's make certain that we are fully leveraging everything that we have in America with what you can bring to the table in Japan, because together we're going to stand far stronger. And everyone I met with in Japan agreed that was the right posture.
Now, Senator, I left it to the end because I want everyone to hear what a realist you are on foreign policy. You and I disagree on aid to Ukraine. You voted against the Ukraine package. I would have voted for it twice if they would have allowed me if I was in the United States Senate. Why did you do that?
Well, we may not disagree on supporting Ukraine, but the magnitude of it, the timing of it, the fact that it didn't move through any sort of committee process, it's not checked. There are many aspects of it that I have difficulty with that are in the bill itself. Challenge that I have right now is this administration's desire to rush into situations overseas. We're jumping well ahead of our European partners here, putting 4x the amount of money up again that Europe has done at this point. And we're doing this at a time when we have massive problems at home. We've got an administration that will not do anything about our southern border, which I think is the greatest national security crisis we've faced right now, and that's all self-induced. We've had over 160 different nationalities apprehended coming across that border, trying to sneak across that border since Joe Biden took office. We've got massive inflation here at home. We've got shortages of critical food supplies in Tennessee. We've got children hospitalized because they can't get formula. And you've got a much simpler, more straightforward answer right in front of us. Joe Biden should stop the war on American energy. He should get us back into the energy business right away, send those signals to the capital markets, bring global energy prices down. That would defund Putin's war in the Ukraine, and it would also address inflation here. We presented with only one choice, which is throw $40 billion into it. There are much better choices that we can pursue, and that's the message I want to send back to the administration.
If it comes back around, will you support it? We got 30 seconds, Senator.
Not at this level. Not at this
All right,
level, not this content of this process.
We're going to have to disagree, Senator Bill Hagerty. That's a rare thing, but I'm glad you came on to talk about it. Bill Hagerty from Tennessee. Thank you, Senator. Coming right back. America, stay tuned.